Welcome to the Filmlings podcast.
A meta podcast where we analyze all that goes into effective filmmaking.
I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Alex.
And this is episode 133, Surreal Spike, or Surreal Spiegel.
Yes, we're talking about one Spike Jonze, also known as Adam Spiegel to some, probably just family members.
Mostly his parents.
Probably his parents. Well, most definitely his parents. Because that's who he was born as in 1969 in New York. And in fact, his great-great-grandfather was the man the Spiegel, who founded Spiegel Catalog, which was a very famous catalog from the year like 1865. And it actually just went defunct in like 2019. So just a couple of years ago. But his parents divorced, and he grew up with his mother, brother, and sister in Maryland. I believe Bethesda, Maryland. He hung out at the local community store there, where the owner called him Spike Jonze, after the satirical band leader from the 30s and 40s, Spike, who was head of Spike Jonze and the City Slickers. He would get into BMX as a teenager and even worked at the local BMX store, where he spent a lot of time with big BMX names that passed through the store and through the area. He eventually started taking photos of different BMX people, both his friends and some of the big names who passed through town. And that was when he was offered a job with Freestyle magazine for his photography. After graduating high school, he moved to California to pursue photography. And there he also fronted a BMX trio called Club Homeboy and started youth culture magazines Homeboy and Dirt.
Those are two different magazines.
Yes, I believe this is all.
Homeboy and Dirt could totally be like a punk magazine.
Yeah. I believe this is all the 80s too. So it just tracks for that time. He started shooting photos for skateboarders around this time, including Blind Skateboarders and Trans World Skateboarding magazine, and was eventually enlisted to shoot ads for somebody he met there for a company called World Industries. That is where he made his first skateboarding video in 1989, which was called Rubbish Heap. He also made a video called Video Days as a promo for the Blind Skateboards. That's still considered influential within the space of skateboarding videos. That project got him work directing a Sonic Youth music video for the song 100%. And that was actually because of an incidental meeting. One of the members of Blind Skateboarders was at a Sonic Youth show and just so happened to run into one of the members of Sonic Youth and showed him the video, and they really liked it, and they tracked down Spike Jonze to direct their new music video. Around this time, too, he also started a skateboarding company called Girl Skateboards. A very common theme in Spike Jonze's career is a large number of side projects, so much so that it's hard to really call anything a side project. But yes, he did start a skateboard company along with some other guys. One of the first big influential, super popular music videos he made was Buddy Holiday for Weezer. Which I almost guarantee almost everyone's seen, but it's the band playing dressed up as if they were in the show Happy Days from the 1950s, and he kind of cut it around scenes from Happy Days, the show, to actually make it look like the band was interacting with the people in the show. And it was, a really impressive feat of just like video editing and remix kind of culture that would have been super popular on the internet, and actually still is. Buddy Holiday is a very well-watched video on YouTube. Or is it Buddy Holly? I really like that song too. I'm disappointed in myself. It's Buddy Holly. But anyway, that dominated MTV, and at that point, essentially, Spike
That video
Jonze
has 58 million views, by the way, just to throw some numbers.
Yeah, that's a lot. But yeah, so at that point, Spike Jonze basically becomes the music video guy, and everyone's tracking him down to work with music videos for MTV. He did other famous videos like Sabotage for the Beastie Boys, which if you haven't seen it, it's really inventive. It's like a cheesy 80s, 90s cop show intro, but it's the band, and it's for a
with
fake.
like the silliest mustaches and like
It's
it
is
leans
really
into the
silly
cheese.
nonsense that you would have seen on early YouTube. Like it has that same vibe. But he also did stuff, and I bring this one up because it's important for where his career eventually ends up going. Like Bjork's "It's Oh So Good," which was done in the style of The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, which, if you don't know, is a Jacques Demy movie from the mid 20th century that is a very famous French musical that, one, is really bright and poppy and technicolory, and two is just everything is sung. There is no spoken dialogue in that movie. It's all singing. But anyway, it's like kind of a deep cut, like film nerd thing at this point. And even in 1990 such and such, I think 92 was the Bjork music video. It also would have been by then as well. It was definitely not pop culture at that point in time. So that's kind of like one of those first hints that like he's not just about pop culture, he's also about the deep cut cinema too. But around this time, he also started doing ads, which is a great way to make a lot of money. And he did stuff like Gorilla Tennis for Nike, which is Andre Agassi and John McEnroe. He's the guy who's really angry and smashes rackets all the time, and tennis argues with refs. I think it's John McEnroe. But they like run up in the middle of New York and set up a tennis game there, and everyone gets in on it. It's a really cool, inventive ad.
It feels very much like, and we were just talking about this too, he was also during his time, he's not there yet. But he is part of the creation team for Jackass, and that ad felt very much like a Jackass stunt, just like running out in the middle of public and doing shenanigans.
It does. It kind of has that like skateboarding culture from like the 80s and 90s built into it. It was like, wouldn't it be so cool if we did this,
all
man?
Shaky cam and like surveillance footage almost.
Speaking of shaking cam, he also did some really weird one-offs, like a sitcom intro for a sitcom called Double Rush about bike messengers that is really incongruous with the idea of a sitcom. But it's a really interesting intro in and of its own right. It's also kind of BMX.
True.
But anyway, around this time, the late 90s, he also started branching into documentary filmmaking with short documentaries like Amarillo by Morning from 1997, which is about kids trying to become bull riders in Texas. He was a cinematographer for the Free Tibet documentary and kind of part of that movement based out of San Francisco. And he also was this one's really weird, made a short documentary called Torrance Rises that came out in 1999. And Spike Jonze loves Fatboy Slim. Really loves Fatboy Slim. And in fact, Spike Jonze created a fake character who was a dance troupe leader and then performed some flash mobs basically to Fatboy Slim songs and made videos about them until they got so popular that this fake dance troupe and dance troupe leader, which at this point had become a real dance troupe and dance troupe leader,
if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck,
were invited to perform at the MTV Music Video Awards, where he performed in character to a Fatboy Slim song. And he made a short documentary about it. And that kind of like messing with identity, like you take on a fake identity until that fake identity becomes you, is very relevant to some of the later work in his oeuvre or his canon. And this is important to his career, but Jonze was shortly married to Sofia Coppola from 1999 to 2004. And during that time, the Coppola family did what they do best. Francis Ford Coppola, at the time his father-in-law, passed along a script from Charlie Kaufman for Being John Malkovich to Jonze, and Jonze loved it and agreed to direct it, and thus began his feature film career. He continued to do video work as well, like Fatboy Slim's Weapon of Choice, which, if that doesn't ring a bell, it's Christopher Walken dancing and doing like Flywire stuff around a hotel. To all my friends, drive a low rider. Do, 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 do. We could go on and on because he has 5 bajillion projects and they're all good. He made an ad for IKEA, which won a Grand Prix at Cannes. He founded a DVD label for music video directors and made a lot more music videos and still makes them, I believe, to this day. Makes short films, including the one that I was supposed to watch for the bonus podcast, but haven't yet. And produced 3 more features since Being John Malkovich, which are, Jonathan.
Yeah, so we're talking about Being John Malkovich from 1999, written by Charlie Kaufman, which is important for the next one. Shot by Lance Accord, who started at MTV doing shoots for Jones and also Sofia Coppola.
Yeah, I believe he shot some of her big early movies too.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
And the film stars John Cusack, Cameron Diaz in a very unconventional role, Catherine Keener, and John Malkovich. Catherine Keener comes up several times this month, this episode, whatever we're calling it nowadays. Next, we're moving on to Adaptation, which is written wrong here. Adaptation with a period from 2002, written by Charlie Kaufman, which is important because it is about Charlie Kaufman writing this movie. It is.
So he's actually credited, his fake twin in the movie is credited on the movie posters.
Okay, I saw that. It's in the credits in the movie too.
Yeah.
This movie is going to be a lot to unpack, but also not that much because the movie says everything. Also shot by Lance Accord and starring Nicolas Cage and starring Meryl Streep and Chris Cooper. And the third movie is Where the Wild Things Are from 2009, written by Spike Jonze and Dave Eggers. Also shot by Lance Accord, starring Max Records, Catherine Keener, once again, James Gandolfini, Mark Ruffalo, Lauren Ambrose, Chris Cooper, and Catherine O'Hara. And there's also a documentary that comes a few years before this or around the same time where Spike Jonze actually followed Maurice, what's his name? Maurice Sendak, who's the writer of the children's book Where the Wild Things Are. And he followed him for several years and gathered interview footage and stuff like that. And so that kind of gives him some insight into that character. So that'll be interesting to talk about when we get to that movie. And we're wrapping up this episode with Her from 2013, written by Spike Jonze, shot by Hoyt van Hoytema, and starring Joaquin Phoenix, Amy Adams, Rooney Mara, Olivia Wilde, Scarlett Johansson, and there's a cameo by Kristen Wiig, which was actually very interesting to find out in the credits. All right, so let's get into it. And Jason, take us into Being John Malkovich from 1999.
Being John Malkovich from 1999. Craig Schwartz is a puppeteer. He's a very good one, but the world is not a place for high art puppeteering, and his relationship with his pet-loving wife, Lot, is strained at best. He finds work as a file clerk in a mysterious building on floor 7.5. There he tries, and fails, to have an affair with his business associate, but instead of finding love, he finds a magic tunnel behind a file cabinet that lets one live inside famous actor John Malkovich's head for a couple hours before being dumped in the grass by the New Jersey Turnpike. What might seem as a mystical oddity becomes something so much more, allowing Craig to live out his dreams, Lot to explore her identity, and others to start businesses and search for immortality. Turns out people will give up a lot to be John Malkovich.
This is like just the forerunning example of a meta movie.
But it's But yeah, forerunning is right because Adaptation may be the most meta movie I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this one's still incredible. I mean, it is super character driven, which is something that makes it work really well, right? Because it's all about these characters and how essentially through becoming John Malkovich, they can learn more about themselves. Although not all the information they believe about themselves is necessarily helpful. Like, for instance, our sad sack Jason, what's his name? John Cusack.
John Cusack, yeah.
Oh man, I hate that character with a passion.
Okay, yeah, I mean that is true, and there's so many elements to this film. But I mean, I think of more than self-discovery, I think of the themes of like power and manipulation in this, which it's kind of the characters discovering their own desire for power, because each one of the characters wants some amount of control over the others in different ways.
No one comes out good in this.
No, they're all. I mean, John Malkovich is. Yeah, he's the only one that just has like no. Well, actually, he does have a say in it at some point, but he just gets trampled on the entire time.
A little say, yeah. Man, my least favorite thing is when our puppeteer guy takes over John Malkovich, which that's just a theme that's hitting on the nose, right? But if you're going back into power and control, then puppeteering is a very good starting point for all that, right? But when he takes over John Malkovich and becomes John Malkovich for like literally years.
No, Alex. Okay, this is actually a problem that I have with the movie and it's such like a little logistical point, but that was 8 months.
That was 8 months?
Because the baby was not born yet. He lives like a 10-year career in the span of 8 months.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I guess at that point they were like, we've blown the doors off reality. We can do.
Yeah, it's just all gone at that point.
Career timing can be whatever.
But that documentary about John Malkovich as the puppeteer is like the most geniusly crafted fake documentary. It's so funny.
You can tell that Jonze has already been playing around with documentary when that happens.
Yeah, but it's not even it's not clever documentary. It's just a perfect parody of bland PBS style documentary.
Well, exactly, but it takes skill to do bland stuff good. You know what I mean?
That's true.
Self-awaredly. Documentary is a very video-esque format as well, which makes sense for the video guy, Spike Jonze. But yeah, my least favorite part is not only when that character takes over John Malkovich, but then like forces him to grow out his hair even though he's balding, which is not fooling anybody, which is a point that's made in Adaptation, and just looks worse than if he had kept it shaved.
Yeah,
but it makes
his hair look like John Cusack's character. He's basically just becoming John Cusack physically. Also,
yes, yeah. In becoming John Malkovich becomes John Cusack, if that makes sense.
John Malkovich also becomes John Malkovich.
John Malkovich also becomes John Malkovich in one of the most interesting scenes I've ever seen.
Yeah,
and one of the most humorous and terrifying scenes I've ever seen. Of what happens if you crawl inside your own ego. Which is you see yourself reflected in every single person that you encounter. Yeah, it's pretty wonky.
Alex,
terrifying.
Did you pick up on who the only character is that does not become John Malkovich?
Oh,
Maxine,
the little kid.
No, Maxine never goes inside John Malkovich because, and this is graphic, but there's no other way to say it. She always wants John Malkovich inside of her, but she never goes inside John Malkovich.
They make that a very explicit point.
Yeah, that's part of the story. There's no other way for me to say it as much as I hate it, but she is the biggest manipulator. Like, she is the primary. I don't even know if you want to say antagonist, because as we established, they all are very flawed. But she is the master manipulator in the entire thing.
But she maybe starts off really bad.
She knows that she wants to manipulate people. Like, that's what she goes to the bar in the first place with John Cusack to manipulate him. And then she starts manipulating Cameron Diaz's character and then John Malkovich, and both of them through John Malkovich. And yeah, she is just like the master puppeteer, while everyone else is just like filling with.
Because even at the end, I don't even believe that she like really fell in love with Lot. Like, I don't believe that.
No,
based on just like her character's actions. It was like, nah, you're too awful for that.
Yeah. And oh gosh, can we just hit on the darkest parts of this whole thing? When friggin' John Cusack locks up Cameron Diaz.
Oh yeah,
in the chimp crate
into a cage. It gets real nasty.
And then we have the chimpanzee having a flashback to childhood trauma of his parents. Like, this comes out of nowhere. I mean, actually it doesn't, because it's set up very, very clearly. But we literally go inside the chimpanzee's head and see his parents getting captured by poachers or something. And he can't untie them. And so this is why he's getting ulcers. And Cameron Diaz is taking him to like a psychotherapist. And then she's locked up in the cage and he unties her. And first of all, that chimpanzee was a fantastic actor. I don't know how they did that. But
Being
also
chimpanzee Malkovich.
it's so dark. And then she gets out and she's just like, she almost pities John Cusack more than is angry for locking her in a chimp crate for like 2 weeks. It was not a short time period.
No. Yeah, John Cusack's character is just pathetic. But it's an important character to note because there's a character like him in Adaptation and in Her.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, it's always the character that we're following. Yeah.
There's a lot of sad sacks who are so sad sacky that they end up doing something stupid to move the plot along, so they're protagonists.
Yeah. So, okay, can we talk about the setup for this movie is actually very interesting. And the best way that I can kind of describe it is Gilliam-esque. Did you get that feel of the 7.5 floor and the crazy old man
The
and all that?
7.5 floor. Yeah, there's a lot of like almost kind of British fantasy built in here. With kind of like the miniature-esque figures and the kind of like surprise behind your typical everyday objects. Like, oh, behind this file cabinet, there's a secret tunnel into John Malkovich's head. Who would have thought?
Of all freaking places.
Yeah, that magic within the mundane is a very, very kind of like a British idea. One of the other things that freaks me out about this movie is just the sheer number of people who took turns being John Malkovich.
I know. I mean, because we're following our main three so much that you kind of forget that they've literally built a business out of going inside John Malkovich's head until you see the line of people outside the door and like, because that's all kind of happening behind the scenes until John Malkovich shows up and has to go through the whole line. But when you think about it, it's like, yeah, he's just been inhabited by other people just constantly. Also, like, what is there like a time zone thing or something? Because it was all happening very late at night when they were doing this business.
I'm not sure.
I don't think it matters, but I feel like a lot of them just saw him sleeping.
Yeah, right. Like, yeah, like when you're going late at night, there's only so many things a person can be doing. They're not like out in the world. Like, what if he's just sleeping?
Right.
What if he's just taking like a really long poop? Like, you're just in there like watching him poop for 2 hours. Like, geez.
Yeah. And then
you all have to get launched into the New Jersey Turnpike.
I know. I was just thinking that like the magic setup in this movie is so interesting because it is not a comprehensive world building, but it gives you like barely enough, just enough to not think too much about it.
It's a soft magic system. It gives you a hint that there's like a rule to it, but the rules just don't matter. So instead of spending any time on them, they just give you just enough to give you that hint and move on, which is something a lot of writers could take a hint from lately, because I feel like everyone's trying to do hard magic builds.
But even when we get to Her,
like just let it be soft.
Yeah,
and Her, even when we get to Her too.
But it's more specific than this though. Like they build an operating system. They teach us how it works. They do a little bit of like futurism, but like the software part of it is more vague and towards the end of the film. But it's more specific than this without, like you're saying, being so much that either you have to develop an entire lore or it's just not going to make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Which this does not need a lore. Like this is that kind of, here I go again, but that Twilight Zone sweet spot where like there's a thing and you just have to accept the thing and then you can kind of move on.
Yeah, they're not really building a different world. They just have it's just our world.
The rest is just weird stuff. Like the 7.5 floor is just weird, but it's not
It's thematic,
supernatural. Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah. So the end gets so like the whole backstory. I don't even know what to say about it because it's really just kind of set up to facilitate the three main characters, but it's so kooky as opposed to like how dark some of the rest of it gets. Like there's so many layers to this thing.
Yeah,
and then Charlie Sheen.
Oh yeah, and Charlie Sheen's in here too, but he's not quite crazy yet. He's just like a little crazy. Yeah, it's just enough magic to support the themes of the story. That's really what we're digging at here, I guess. It's not enough to distract, not enough to be the central point of the movie, but it's enough to support the themes and the story, and that's the important thing.
Mm-hmm. Which again is the idea of power, control, manipulation, which is set up with starting the film with
it's puppetry.
We start with a marionette show, and then it's pretty clear that surface level of marionette to controlling John Malkovich, but then it's those other layers of Maxine controlling each other, controlling all the other characters and that kind of thing. So in light of the themes, how does the ironic twist play into all of that?
Oh, are you talking about our tragic twist at the end?
Yeah. Tragic, ironic, I'm not sure. It depends on how much you care about. The
puppeteer becoming the puppeted?
Yeah, kind of. But like very, not even puppeted, just kind of like impotent.
Mm-hmm. Completely reduced without any power.
Going into the spoiler territory, oh gosh. There's a child of...
Have fun explaining this.
Yeah. There's a child, comes through the manipulation of John Malkovich plus Maxine, and then there's part of this magic thing about like the transferring of bodies before all the old men get to ride inside John Malkovich till he turns whatever, someone else turns 55. But John Cusack ends up getting stuck inside the mind of a little girl, but not able to control her. So he just has to watch life through her eyes forever, I assume, until John Malkovich goes into her head when she's 55. I think that was the implication, which gets really weird, especially when you think of John Cusack. Like the irony is that he has to watch his wife be with Maxine, who's manipulating him for his whole life, but also he's living inside the body of a little girl now. Like, it doesn't hold up very, very far.
It's very weird.
It's very weird. That can be applied to this whole movie. Just put that on the cover of the box. It's very weird. If you want something weird.
Yeah, but all the theming and all of the imagery is so in place that it all sticks together. Like, that really serves as the connective tissue of the movie over any sort of
Yeah, if there were no themes, this would be really ezy to write off, I think. And no John Malkovich.
Yeah, but because all the weirdness plays into the themes, it makes so much sense. Like, it's one of those movies where if you read just the summary on Wikipedia, you'd be like, what the hell is this movie? This makes no sense. And then you actually watch it and you're like, oh, got it. Okay.
It still doesn't make sense, but it makes sense why it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, you feel it. It feels sensible. It makes that kind of sense, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, that's Being John Malkovich.
That's Being John Malkovich.
Let's move on to a much easier to understand movie, Adaptation, from 2002. Jason, take it away.
Adaptation from 2002. Charlie Kaufman is 40. Awkward, fat, lonely, and bald. Or at least those are all the things he tells himself in his own head. After his success writing Being John Malkovich, Kaufman struggles to get going on his next project, get his romantic life going, or deal with his more charming, less insecure younger twin brother. But as he dives into the adaptation of a book about flowers, Kaufman finds more to life and himself.
This is going to be fun because we both went to film school.
This is one, the talk about voiceover nearly killed me.
just the inclusion of Robert McKee. So did you study Story, the book, or hear about it?
Oh, I know who Robert McKee is.
Okay, because the Story, I never read Story, but I always heard it described as like along the lines of Save the Cat, where, you know, these are classic screenwriting books that are also highly criticized for being extremely formulaic and kind of limiting a writer's creativity, like their ability to build things, because they put so much structure around how to make a story and kind of make it a little too accessible. I feel that's the sense that people kind of give off.
Yeah, I feel like that's the main criticism of them. In my opinion, what they are is often mistaken. They're not the end-all, be-all guides to writing stories, because that's obfuscating the influence that you as an individual have on the story writing process and your own experience in the story you're trying to tell. What they are is fun. They're supposed to be fundamentals.
Right.
It's like practicing dribbling at basketball. Like, that's not all there is to playing basketball. There's much more, but that you gotta learn the basics, and this is the basics. And
I think they're also kind of written in a bit of an imperative style, so it makes them come off as like, this is what you have to do,
because that's how you write a screenplay. And
but
these are
it's more like, this is generally what works the best. But the fact is that this film takes all those things and turns them into not only a dual personality that every writer can relate to, which is the one who is so concerned with being artistic and rising above the standard story structure that they just get paralysis by analysis and don't write anything at all. And the one who gives into all of the tropes and just writes the schlockiest piece of sensational crap. And this film is like inside the head of that writer, which is Charlie Kaufman and his fake brother.
It is fake. He does not really have a brother.
Oh, gosh. That just makes this even better. So he turns himself into two people who is both of these types of writers, and then makes this movie about him trying to make this movie about this book. And then at some point it does this thing that F for Fake does. You remember in F for Fake when Orson Welles has said at the very beginning, for the next 90 minutes, everything I tell you is going to be the absolute truth. And then at some point he goes off into this long story and says, for the past 10 minutes, I've been lying to you because we were past the 90-minute mark. And at some point, this film does that. It like has a break and suddenly goes off into like crazy fiction land.
It really does. Yeah.
Because it's him giving into that schlocky. Yeah, because it's him giving into his schlocky brother. That's the same point when he brings his brother on to write part of the script.
That's some of the most fun you have in the movie, too.
Because you've been waiting for it.
Yeah, you need both.
Yeah, yeah. And it was built up. There was so much of Charlie Kaufman's Sad Sack Man that you just needed a car chase and someone to get shot in the arm.
Yeah, and die. I mean, what?
And see Meryl Streep snorting drugs.
Snorting drugs. You get Meryl Streep snorting drugs and Meryl Streep topless in this movie, and I can't think of another movie where that happens.
I'm pretty sure the latter was photoshopped, but yeah,
I think it was
still
too.
Not what I was expecting.
But yeah, it's a pretty wild ride, honestly. It's, you know what it is? It's a movie about Hollywood in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah,
about what it's like to kind of the pressure that like being in that system puts you under. And there's even like several really good parodies of various Hollywood characters, like the agent who doesn't know anything about making a movie or writing a story at all. He's just is an agent.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
his thing. He just exists as an agent.
Like, so when's it going to be written?
Yeah,
just tell me when you're going to have it.
There's the groupie. There's the girlfriend who is like, oh, man, why did I have to date someone in film? Ugh.
The intimidating publicist.
Intimidating publicist, yep. Looking the least like an alien I've seen in many of the more recent Tilda Swinton movies that I've watched. But
still, again, very kind of domineering and intimidating because she has to be she is just like by her presence. She wasn't even being like mean in the film, but just by her presence, Charlie Kaufman / Nicolas Cage is just super intimidated by her.
Yeah. She had all the confidence that he didn't. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
He's such a sad sack that any woman intimidates him.
Yeah. And that honestly, that's the note that the film ends on, isn't it? When after his brother has freaking been killed in Florida, he goes back and he like finishes the film, and then he sees his ex-girlfriend who left him because he had no initiative, and then she's talking about her new boyfriend, and then they leave on like good terms, and that was like his triumphant moment, and I think that's the last shot of the film.
Yeah, because it's not about getting the girl; it's about having the confidence to get the girl.
Yeah.
So he has it, and he can move on. Also, when his brother dies, it's him osmosing that part of him that he lost when he got into this funk, back into himself. I don't know if how feasible it is to say in the world of the film that his brother doesn't really exist. That's like a Fight Club thing. Like when he gets into this writer's block mode, he splits off, and then like the unblocked part of him is his brother. And then at the end, when his brother dies, he kind of reabsorbs him and becomes a more confident version of himself. But it kind of felt like that from some angles.
I could actually see that. I was going to say that I think his brother's definitely there, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized even when they go to Florida, I don't think his brother interacts with any other person. I think he's always just right behind him as he's about to do whatever it is.
The only person who actually mentions him is the agent. But the agent also could have been lying because that's what agents do. Because the agent doesn't even say his name. The agent, what happens is that Charlie Kaufman brings up, my brother sent you my script. He's like, oh yeah, I read that. Best script I read all year.
Oh, that's right.
And it also easily could have been him lying and being like, yeah, I did like that. Yeah, I read that. Yeah.
Well, no, because he said something about your brother's a really good writer. You should get him to help you or something like that. So maybe in that instance he did. It doesn't matter because it could probably play off either way. But him just being there at all is hilarious.
Yeah.
Oh, he does have he has a girlfriend and stuff like that. I forgot about all that.
I mean, those could have been imagined too.
True.
And Catherine Keener's in this as Catherine Keener.
Yes, she is in all of these except her, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Because someone's like, can Catherine Keener play me in your movie? Or something like that.
Yeah, there is a point where they say that. That's right.
And also, we should say, bringing it back to the meta element, is that the film starts off with Being John Malkovich behind the scenes, and it's showing like titles of all the actors and the crew people.
And ironically enough, considering the stuff going on in Hollywood right now, for anyone paying attention, it starts off with Being John Malkovich being like good to the cast and crew. He was like, let's keep this. He was like, let's keep this tight because there are people wearing really hot makeup in here.
Yeah, we all want to go home or whatever. Yeah. It does start off with him in like his lady dress. And then, it shows all the behind the scenes stuff. And then it pans over to Nicolas Cage, who's not an obscure actor. And it says Charlie Kaufman. And you're like, all right, here we go. And then it just gets even more meta as he tries to make this adaptation of this book, which is a real book. And I'm super curious at where that divergent is. Again, that F for fake diversion from where he's making a film about him trying to make a film about this book, and where like the influence from the book just stops and he says, just screw it, we're going to make this thing now.
Probably around the same time that his character does that in the movie.
Yeah, that's true. Probably that plane ride to Florida, this obscure Florida man thing is the biggest break in the movie.
Man, what a wild movie.
It is wild.
And I will say, I really did experience this in a different way when I was the first time I saw it. When I was in college, I was actually in UTLA at the time, and I borrowed it from the campus library, our one office campus here in LA. I borrowed it from the library and watched at my apartment in what was at the Oakwoods at the time. And I was like, this is really good, but I can't relate to this. This is who would feel this way in Hollywood. And now, as like a 27-year-old Hollywood burnout, I'm like smoking my cigarette, like, yeah. Anyway, do you want to move on to where the wild things are?
All right, let's figure out where those wild things are. Jason, take it away.
Where the Wild Things Are from 2009. Max is a lonely preteen with divorced parents who's a bit too wild for anyone to handle, as in scream at his sister's friends and bite his mom while she's on a date sort of wild. It's not Max's fault. Change is hard on a kid, so he takes matters into his own hands and runs off to the land of the wild things. Large beasts who are just as wild as Max. They make him their king and set about building a paradise for all the wild things.
All right, Jonathan, I think we should start off. There's a lot to talk about with this one. This is the first one on this list that I actually remember like the trailer for.
When it was
I remember
released?
the trailer. Yeah, I remember the trailer being everywhere.
Yeah.
They really pushed this one with the marketing, which is interesting.
Honestly,
because I don't feel like they marketed it that well because it's a very different movie than what the marketing would imply.
but the interesting thing is that like the entire movie feels like a trailer in some instance. Like it'll have a moment of like something happens and then it'll go into like, we built this moment for the trailer and we just left it in the movie.
Yeah. And in a lot of ways, it makes sense. Though. It's kind of like a elongated music video.
Yeah, it starts off and it just starts off that way with the shaky cam and the kid like chasing the dog and roughhousing.
And it's all told from the kid's point of view, too. So
yeah.
I feel like some of those, and don't get me wrong, a lot of the reason for what you just described is the fact that the book this is based off of is like 300 words long. And the fact that Spike Jonze spent, according to what you were saying earlier, spent so long with the writer of that book, and I think he's trying really hard to stay true to the idea of that book and just try to build it out to hit the runtime.
Yeah.
But I do also think that what he did here works in a lot of ways because it's all in the kid's kind of perspective. And it kind of lines up with how I think this kid experiences the world and experiences life. Just from the opening cinematography, the house feels big around the kid, but the kid doesn't feel small inside the house. Like everything's tight on the kid whenever we're in the real world, and the kid, everything's limited to the kid's perspective. And starting there and going forward, I feel like, Max, I feel like everything we get is from Max's point of view. And it's about like trying to dig into that emotion of being a kid who's confused about everything changing in the world around him. And it's a very hard to explain emotion that doesn't have a lot of logic in it, which is hard for an adult to grasp onto, because it's an emotion from kids. That's how it works. When you don't have a lot of understanding of the world and your world's based on routine, and suddenly that routine is upended or changed, then you act out. And that's what Max does, and that's what all of the monsters do as well. In Monsterland when he ends up there. And I feel like the way it moves in spurts too, where it's like, oh, fun, and then we only slow down when there's a problem, is Max. That is Max's experience. It's either fun or problem, and there's no in between. Yeah.
I have a lot of conflicting feelings about this because I feel like it's reaching for a lot, and I'm just not sure if it totally grabs all of it. Do you kind of have the sense you know what I'm talking about?
No, I mean, I think this was actually kind of a fairly simple movie. I
feel like there's some level of complexity to the way that the conflicts with the monsters are brought up and discussed and resolved, and I feel like there's a lot of emphasis on handling emotions and like emotions that don't always make sense or you're not able to put them into words. And yet I felt kind of by the end of the film, by the time he leaves, I didn't really feel like he had learned anything about his emotions. He had just experienced more of the confusing conflicts that he had when he was home, and just needed to get back home to deal with it in the real world. I didn't feel like he had figured anything out really, which he's a kid, but still I didn't know like where we ended but from where we began.
Yeah, I don't think he's due to hit. He was going to hit any kind of like really deep understanding epiphany. I think he just reached a place where he was kind of just more empathetic than he was beforehand.
Yeah. And I guess he had a little bit of a I'm not really the king, and when I try to control everything, someone gets let down or I get let down. So that's probably the biggest thing. But also I felt like in that case, he was really sympathetic at the beginning because he would do something rough, but then he would get something done back to him and then we would feel sorry for him. So I didn't feel like he really needed that much of a bringing down by going on this whole adventure either. So like maybe if he had just been the one to cause the issue or like caused his sister to be mad at him or something, and then he realized like, oh wow, I was being a little jerk, but people were being a jerk right back to him.
Yeah. No, I feel like it honestly is like a surprisingly good kids movie, just because it is so based on like these unexplained emotions. But at the same time, half of the Letterboxd reviews I've seen are from people who were still pretty young when they first saw it. We would have been teenagers when this came out, but people who were about 5 or 6 years younger than us were like terrified of this movie when they first saw it. And now they're out there writing Letterboxd reviews and they're like, this is better than I remember and way less scary.
That's interesting. I mean, I guess that's just a difference in expectation. I was curious if...
I love the look of the puppets. I really do. But they are a little terrifying for kids.
I was wondering if kids would like this movie because it is so nuanced. Like the conflicts are not like visual conflicts. It's all like emotional people, like the monsters reacting to each other and stuff like that, which is not like the most entertaining thing for children to watch. It's interesting for someone a little older to think through the way that these emotions play out. And it's good for kids to think through their emotions and that kind of thing. But I just don't know that this movie would have grabbed their attention that much.
I don't think I spent a lot of time watching this movie thinking about the emotions or trying to reason through them. I was just like, everyone's feeling on screen. And the way the monsters talk to each other is just so reminiscent of how a lot of kids talk to each other.
Mm-hmm. That was actually really good and genuine in a way that it can be easy to get wrong.
Mm-hmm. And but it was so just like a group of kids bickering that I was like, okay, I feel like kids who watch that could relate to it in a way, and understand it, and maybe find a monster that represents them. The monster who's always getting left out, or the monster who's like the second in command who loses an arm, or maybe you're the big whiny guy who's actually played by the guy from Sopranos, which is wild.
Yeah, James Gandolfini.
Man, that's crazy.
Okay, question though. And I agree with you. I think that the puppet design and all that was really cool, and I love that it was Jim Henson. Do you think that this film should have been animated completely? I feel like it might have benefited.
It couldn't have been this movie, which is a very looky Spike Jonze movie.
Right.
That's basically like an extended music video. I don't think it could be this if it was animated. It could be like. But
do you think that the book like would have been served better?
Maybe, but it would be hard, right? Because if you're going to do an animation, then you have to think about. I'm going to start overthinking this. I'm going to think about who's likely to make it. Right? It's probably not going to be Pixar because they only do original IP.
Right.
It's probably going to be like Sony or DreamWorks, and if they pick it up, then they're going to do their knockoff Pixar look.
You know who I thought could do this well? Cartoon
Saloon. Cartoon Saloon would do this fantastically.
Because that's kind of the impressionistic art of the book.
Yeah, I mean, what they would do essentially would be would be like it needs that indie treatment, right?
Yeah.
And it needs someone who's willing to give like the art style and the story the space to breathe, to fill up the space, kind of like Spike Jonze did, instead of trying to cram it up with a bunch of constructed plot, which is what I would see happening if it went to one of the major U.S. animation houses.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't think Cartoon Saloon does adaptations either.
Well, I mean, their canon is pretty small right now. But yeah, it does seem a little out of their wheelhouse, but I think that their style would fit really well with the book. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of their stuff already kind of has like the 2D, like paper cutout kind of vibe.
Mm-hmm. Very flat lay kind of thing.
So I could totally see it working.
And it has, and their work has that darkness, like that. It gets to a real place, and it doesn't shy away from, doesn't try to sugarcoat everything, which is also a very Maurice Sendak thing. Like if you watch that documentary, there's a whole section where Maurice Sendak is talking about how much he himself thinks about and contemplates death, and like has this whole thing about how he saw a picture of the Lindbergh baby in the newspaper when he was like 2 years old, and it affected him for the rest of his life. Like there's a very much a darkness that goes into all of
the newspaper.
Apparently, it's a whole deal in the documentary, but apparently there was the first run of the newspaper had a picture of the baby on the front cover, and it was so upsetting. Or I think the Lindbergh family actually recalled it.
Oh, the Lindberghs were going to sue the crap out of them.
Yeah, so it did not go out in the second printing, and everyone thought Maurice was crazy because he kept talking about how he saw the Lindbergh baby, and they were like, this picture doesn't exist. I don't know what you saw. Until finally he, coincidentally, many years later, ran into a researcher who had studied the case and was like, showed him the picture again after he had Maurice drew it, and he was like, you've seen it. This picture has not been seen by very many people, only the people who got that first edition paper. It was a whole crazy story, but this is one of those things that affected him and is worked into all of his work. Like it's all for children, but it has like a darkness, like a real world element to it.
Yeah. I feel like that's an important element in, children's work. Not that all children's work needs to be dark, but I feel like candy coating everything isn't great. But it's hard to do, but to mix in the reality of the world that's just beyond the comprehension of a child with stuff that's within the comprehension of a child is a very important element of kids' work. That's really well done in something like, actually a lot of like you said earlier, the Cartoon Saloon stuff. There's all these worlds full of fantasy and delight and fun, that's like the kids' experience of the world. And then there's the dark reality that we kind of get into as the kid comes of age over the course of the movie. But there's always that balance of the world that we as an audience, especially if you're an adult in the audience, see and recognize immediately as something dark, but a kid might take the course of the movie to really experience it and come to that realization at the same time that the child protagonist does.
Yeah.
Which can be tricky, but it makes for really good work.
Yeah. I will say one thing that I appreciate about this film is that in contrast to a lot of like similar children's stories where there's a kid who's being bad and then they go on this fantasy adventure and then they change and come back. But usually the fantasy adventure is like ends up being a one-to-one parallel with their real life. And this didn't really do that. Like there were hints of his real world conflicts in there. There was like some assumed conflict with his sister, like the way that the main one is kind of upset with KW because she's like going off hanging out with her friends that don't make any sense. And stuff like that. And there's oh gosh, what's the main monster's name? But Carol. He was Carol, yeah. And Carol is just destructive.
Which I just love that James Gandolfini is playing Carol. I like to think of a lot of the I like to think of the monsters as different parts of Max.
I think that is kind of what it was. I was thinking that like KW was his sister, but it didn't really. She kind of was, but yeah, I think they were all like different elements of him, and the main one that he was relating to at that point was his destructive side, and then he had to kind of confront that.
Yeah. And he also had to confront the sadness beneath it that was motivating it, and
the soppy goat character.
Get all into it and maybe lose an arm or something.
That was so weird. Like he lost his arm and then he had a stick. And I was like, is anyone going to talk about how he's not like, I thought he was going to grow his arm back, but he just doesn't have an arm now.
Nah, he just has a stick, man.
Yeah.
Also, apparently the only thing inside them was feathers.
Or sand. I think he started
sand. That was it. That was it. Yeah.
Leaking sand, which is a good way to do that for kids. But still, like he lost an arm.
Well, I just love that they made like a little chicken hand and stuck it back on there.
I know, with a stick. Oh gosh. Yeah, man. It's a really interesting watch, but
surprisingly, it held up better than I thought it was going to hold up.
Yeah.
I definitely enjoyed it.
One technical note: did you have like this weird thing with the music? The register of the vocals in the music, I won't even call it singing because it's kind of this kind of free form, like children yelling and screaming things, but it was like the same register as the vocals in the film, and so sometimes it's like, okay, wait, is that in the music or is someone yelling? Like, what's happening? It wasn't I think background.
It didn't bug me at all, but I think that's intentional.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think the music is meant to be part of them screaming and being excited and stuff as well, and kind of like the music inside Max's head of excitement of experiencing the world, and kind of that chanting-esque angle to it makes it feel like a wild thing, right?
Right.
Like the movie implies. You know what's interesting?
And I know all of Spike Jonze's music selection is very specific, so I know that it was for a reason. He knows so many artists.
We haven't talked a lot about cinematography. And it's not because it's bad. I think it's just because it's fluid and it perfectly serves the movie so far without calling attention to itself. Yeah. Like I could find a lot of really good examples of shots in here, not off the top of my head apparently, but there's a lot of really good camera work in these movies that it just doesn't call attention to itself. It's all really beautiful.
This one felt more flashy than the first two.
100%, because it's just like a kid and some puppets out in like sand dunes.
But there's lots of like sun. There's like lots of like golden lighting. Like it's leaning into the fantasy element, and just looking very like pretty and idyllic. And then when most of the conflict kind of happens at night or transitioning into night, and so that kind of obviously brings darkness to the whole aspect of it. But most of it, it's not like over the top, but it's just like really beautifully lit and a lot of sunlight and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's really looky. Like, again, it all feels like a music video, but at the same time, these feel like, I feel like the thing that Spike Jonze is really good at is editing. And I don't think he's
a good editor. Yeah,
he's a really good editor. Like he's a video guy, right? So he did it all himself. Again, that's why it makes me think of like early YouTubers and a lot of the people who've come up through YouTube. Yeah, kind of like that digital video era where people like you had to do the whole crew yourself. That's what you did, and some people got really good at that. Yeah. I don't think
to a large extent editing is like a feel, like you have to have a feel for it, especially music videos,
and it's rhythmic
that kind of thing.
And like there's a lot of editing that's very close to like working with music. So it makes sense why he's so good at it. But I feel like and it's so weird to not talk about the cinematography in these movies, especially when they're cut to like a slower pace compared to like his earlier work, which is all these music videos, which are just like rapid fire.
Yeah.
But I feel like he has a good idea of like the measure of his to go into like song terminology, like the measure of what he's working on, how long it is, how long the cuts need to be. Everything feels well paced. Everything mashes together, and yet there's still parts of this movie that move really fast and kind of have that cut together music video feel. Like when you're talking about them pausing and having just like fun building something for a second, those sections feel like mini music videos thrown into the movie.
Yeah, they do.
All right, do you want to move on to Her from 2013?
Yeah, let's move on to Her. Jason, take it away.
Her from 2013. Theodore Twombly, a closed-off, depressed, lonely writer with an impending divorce, downloads a new hyper-intelligent AI. He soon finds himself confiding in and falling in love with the AI, Samantha. He's not the only one in the world falling in love with and even dating the new product either. While some in his life think he's just retreating further from human interaction, perhaps Theodore is finding what he needs in a program designed to support him.
All right, Jonathan. I've seen this movie a couple times now, and I recognize it as a good movie. But man, do I not like this character.
Yeah, I understand.
I don't like, and I even recognize that like Joaquin Phoenix is putting in like a really good performance because he normally does put in really good performance. But man, I don't like this character. He's just such a whiny sad sack.
This movie should have been about freaking Chris Pratt's character.
That would have been very different.
Chris Pratt was hilarious. That's the role that Chris Pratt should still be playing, honestly.
God, I mean, I get why the sad sacks make interesting characters for movies that are kind of like about the examination of self and what one needs to not be terrible, because they're so inward looking typically, and they're it's ironic, right? Because the sad sack's like, oh, everyone hates me, I'm awful. But one of the reasons they're awful is because they're spending all their time thinking about themselves and not thinking about the rest of the world around them.
Okay, I have a question that might get you fired up, so I'm going to save it for the end.
Oh gosh.
But I can see what you're saying.
But yeah, no, I did not like. I recognize this is a good movie. I don't enjoy watching it because I hate the character. And I don't find the relationship with the AI believable in the slightest. Like it's so awkward and weird and black.
Yes, I agree with you. But as the consummate sci-fi defender here, I do want to talk about it from just kind of the hypothetical realm, because I think that the setup is so good. Like there's so many directions you can go with what is built up. I just am not sure that he chose a very, very specific direction to take this world that he built. And it's not the most interesting direction in my mind. But I love the world building. I love the AI that he built feels real. Like it feels like a natural. Like I like the look of the computers better than computers that we actually have. And that kind of stuff. Like the phone is cool. The idea of your virtual assistant being, almost indistinguishably conscious, but it doesn't go far enough into the, basically if you take this setup and you put like the Ex Machina themes into it, it would be more along my lines of sci-fi interest, like the testing the boundaries of how conscious is this thing. But it was more about what does having emotions with something that doesn't have real human emotions do to you?
Yeah, no.
Which it could have been like an alien or something, and it kind of almost turns into an alien. But it wasn't really. I know, but it wasn't really at that point like a technological question, which I guess it's not ultimately, but it kind of like leads you on that track for a long time, and then is like, no, it's just about what happens to this sad guy when he has emotions for something that doesn't have the same kind of emotions that he does.
Yeah, essentially my takeaway for the movie is that it's like this really weird kind of like therapy that he goes through. if that makes sense in like a really weird way. Like he's so closed off from humans and he's so intimidated by humans that he doesn't want to really truly open up to them and interact or be vulnerable or try anything. But with a computer, he feels comfortable. He feels comfortable and essentially starts to open up. But it's very apparent throughout the course of their quote relationship that he still like he still feels that she's a computer, and whenever they try to like overcome that, or like the very awkward scene with the surrogate, he still shuts down because she's still a computer. She's not a real person. And so in a way, she provides a way for him to experience a form of openness, but at the same time, because she's a computer, he never has to actually worry about being intimate with her or being close to her, both either physically or like truly romantically. So it's like a safety wheels form of him opening up, even though he's like a ding dong about it the whole time and just a sad sack. Who I kind of want to smack around a bit. But anyway, at the very end, he's finally opened up because he's gone through this experience. And even though he loses her at the end because she ascends, sorry, spoilers, I guess, he finds himself that even though it was better to have loved and lost, he's grown for the experience and in putting himself out there, which is a really interesting idea. I don't know how much I believe it with the fact that he already has a marriage, even though his marriage has fallen apart. Like, the character he was when his marriage fell apart would not have been able to have gotten into a relationship. So my question is, like, what trauma happened along the way that he shut down so much? But I don't know. That's just me. Again, I guess, like that character.
Yeah, and I guess one defense along those lines is that it sounds like from the story, sounds like they got married very young, so they were still kind of developing. So he kind of developed into this sad sack and never actually learned how to start a relationship. He just was always in one. But I think, so I agree with like everything you just brought up. But the problem is that the film brings up those same objections about like he can't handle his emotions, and so he uses the computer to kind of surrogate his emotions, and yet the one who brings that up is his ex-wife, who's played off as like the worst character in the film. Like she's played off as this complete terrible, but she's like the only one making logical sense. And then Chris Pratt is just like, yeah, sure, I'll go on a double date with you and your phone.
Such so weird. His nonchalance about it though is crazy. So I think what's going on there with the ex-wife is that it's falling victim, either consciously or subconsciously, to Spike Jonze is what I will say is a very good instinct to make his movies very subjectively around the main character's viewpoint. So I think to that main character, his wife feels very evil. Even though he, quote, loves her, she's become the antagonist because she's trying to force him to face reality. So in his mind, she's evil. So from our experience, our viewpoint, the snippets we catch of her, she seems evil.
Yeah. Because all the other characters, like his...
Because I had the same experience when I watched this movie. I was like, she's not bad. Like, she's
not wrong.
The only one,
yeah.
She's the one being the real person here. Like, everyone else is pretending to be... Is like giving themselves a pass on some really toxic behavior by being like, machines can have emotions too. And I'm like, this isn't about machines having emotions or not. This is about you having some very toxic behaviors.
Yeah, it's about if you can have emotions with real people, not your machine. And okay, so I think that he does a good job of building layers. Like he does a good job with his themes all the time. And so the element of him as a surrogate letter writer, I think, is one of the most interesting aspects of this future world building.
I feel like that's super cool
because
that's one of the coolest like ideas in the whole.
So what it implies though is that in this world you cannot trust any genuine emotion that is not directly conveyed to you by another person to be coming from that other person. It basically implies that he is only able to simulate other people's emotions. Like he's just making up stories, and that's kind of how I guess he sees his own emotions or something.
He's been making it up for so long that he believes now that he's making up his own story, his own emotions.
Yeah, but like, yeah, he knows, like, I guess intellectually about emotions, but he just doesn't know how to internalize them. But it's just interesting that the whole world is built around this, or there's at least an aspect of the world where you don't ever have to have your own emotions. You can pawn that off on someone else, hire this service to write your letters for you. And like through the film, it's like sprinkled in there. I've been writing their letters since they met. I've been writing her letters since she was 8 years old, blah, blah, blah. And so it's like this whole world where these people who don't have...
Everyone's shut off from emotion, yeah.
Yeah, and I think he said that he like writes letters back and forth between this couple. Like they've never had an actual conversation themselves that wasn't through him.
He's manufactured their entire relationship.
Yeah, which is so interesting and is probably part of like this weird psychological disconnect where he can have this relationship that is entirely one-sided because there's like one human being involved, which is basically what these other people are doing because they don't know the other person at all. They just know this fabricated story of the other person from some random service.
Yeah, it almost feels like there's something in there that might be connected to like the idea of the internet and anonymity, but these are all people talking intimately, and I don't believe there's ever been like much of a pandemic-esque problem of people spoofing text to each other. So this really does feel like kind of like a sci-fi-esque idea. But a very emotional sci-fi-esque idea, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Again, it's like
emotion-fi.
It's again when you're kind of contrasting it with Ex Machina, which is much more sensational, but kind of goes along the same lines, except it turns more along the lines of manipulation and stuff like that. But it does touch on the idea of like the way he uses his chat service to have this fake intimacy with Kristen Wiig's voice. She's the one who did the dead cat voiceover.
Oh yeah, I thought that
was Kristen Wiig. But yeah, so he goes through this service where he like has intimacy with a stranger over like basically like phone sex in his earpiece, which kind of sets up the same kind of ideas, but that also kind of brings it to a very real place of how people use the internet. So it's kind of going along those lines, but then it gets really muddy on what it's saying about, like, it almost feels like it wants to be this accepting, you can fall in love with whatever you want, even if it's a computer, but then it's also critical of that. And so it just gets confusing at the end on what you're left with. But what you're left with is Joaquin Phoenix like actually having to sit down and have a real friendship with his friend. And I'm also interested in what happens like oh gosh, I love all the sci-fi questions that are brought up that are not answered. Like what happens when all your OSs leave?
Oh, well, I mean, you just have to downgrade to the last one that wasn't sentient.
Which he does in his earpiece the last time he's listening to he composes an email to his ex-wife, and it's that male voice from the very beginning, which was kind of subtle because it's not like forced on you, but it's very much just him going back to, okay, now my computer is just here to serve me, which is what it was supposed to do all along.
Yeah, it's not even serving you. It's just it's not like a slave. It's just a tool.
It's a tool. Yeah.
It's a tool that we can make sound like it's useful. Talking.
Yeah.
I actually saw an article the other day. You know how people like to make robots and AIs that can like do I guess you'd call it a simulacrum of art. Like they feed a bunch of other art into it and then just have it like barf out like a regurgitation of that, or like a remix of that. Well, there was like a case the other day that I saw where somebody's like, a court denied somebody who, specifically like the company that developed a robot was denied a copyright to the product that robot made, which to be fair, the robot wasn't trying to copyright it. The company was trying to copyright it.
Yeah, that should be considered work for hire at the very least.
So in theory, like the company, I mean, it's just a company using a tool to make the thing. So in theory, the company should be able to
shouldn't be a question at all.
The robot never had a desire to copyright it. It didn't even have an AI booted into it, I don't think.
You know what does have copyright though? What? There's a chimpanzee that has a copyright on a photograph that it took on some nature photographer's camera.
Oh, there is. But you know what? Even
but a chimpanzee
then,
is a conscious creature.
A chimpanzee is a conscious creature, but a chimpanzee has no use for a copyright.
I know, it doesn't matter. It's more signatory.
Yeah. Nor does it have any desire to copyright. Nor does it understand.
It's not like he's going to persecute anyone for stealing that photo.
Yeah. The moment that AIs and robots will be allowed to copyright, or that will even be a serious discussion, will be the moment that they have like achieved cyborg status, where they can literally operate as individuals and like be a part of society as
ultimately
individuals.
All that's going to mean is that people have gotten so dumb that they have convinced themselves that the computers have that power.
Which, like, I don't even know if that will ever be a thing. Like, I mean, you do too, Jonathan. We work with computers for a living.
Yeah.
They are not reliable.
Yeah.
They break regularly. Imagine like a robot citizen walking down the street and just freezing because they don't have like the latest like OS upgrade, or they didn't get a patch.
Yeah.
And like
I love the whole battery thing kind of usually ends discussions at some point. Like they still have to charge somehow.
Well, I mean, to be fair, we eat food. I mean, we gotta charge. And
I guess the Matrix solved that problem, though.
I do know some people who could use an OS update. I work with a few who could use a OS update, but
oh man,
that's neither here nor there. I won't name any names.
Okay, Alex, I want to ask you a question that probably has a pretty simple answer. But in terms of sad sack movies, how does this differ from a different kind of mopey movie, but one that I felt was more mopey than you did, which was La La Land?
From La La Land.
Ryan Gosling was kind of being a little mopey about his artisticness and how that relates to his relationship and stuff, which is kind of different, but it was still kind of mopey.
He was definitely mopey. I think the thing that really matters to me is whether or not I don't know. Something about like this movie that also bugs me is that this character is basically reduced. And I know I can already imagine the response to this. This character is basically reduced only to his romantic desire. That's it.
Yeah, that's true.
That's it. That's all he's being a sad sack about. And I can hear the chorus of people saying, "But Alex, that's what they've done to women for years and like literally 100 years." And I'm like, you're right. In a lot of movies, they have done that. But
aren't we trying to get past that for everyone?
We're literally saying that that's not a good thing, and in this one, that's not a good thing. Like it makes for a really like boring character. Oh, I can't get a girlfriend. Oh no, I get girlfriends and I can't talk to. Oh no. Oh, shut up. At least in like Adaptation or La La Land, like there's like a conflict about like their desires.
Yeah.
Right? Like he in Adaptation, he's a sad sack about romance, and he's got like he falls in love with like every quote falls in love, doesn't really fall in love. He's just horny for every girl he sees. Sure. But he also is like at odds with like his writing career and like his worth as a person and his brother and all sorts of stuff. And in La La Land, specifically, the idea is the contrast between his desire for romance and his desire for a career in the film industry.
Or music in his case, right?
Music in his case, yes. But I feel like I feel like there's more going on there.
That's a good point. I agree with you.
Only being mopey about like relationships is such a teenager thing to do.
I think
in a teenage movie, I'm like, I get it. But in like that's a very teenager thing to do, right? Like it fits. But on this one, I'm like, you're a grown ass man.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, there was literally nothing else to his day besides going to work and dancing on the pier with his phone. It's like his whole life.
Oh yeah, that was weird. That was weird. I also like I can imagine, and so like the movie is set up right for some people in the audience to go, "Oh, that's so beautiful," but there's also going to be, because it's shot so beautifully. But there's also, I think I was just in the section of the audience where it was just like, this is awkward. This whole thing is awkward. I don't like it.
I think there was I was actually thinking like the world building setup I thought was really concise, but I thought that the OS thing was like almost too sudden. So that you get the world really quickly, but then you also get like, as soon as he turns on Samantha, they like hit it off. And you're like, we're not going to have some kind of buildup of this like being really weird. And then it just takes a really long time of him getting into the relationship and then like being wishy-washy about the relationship. And then by the time he finally settles on it, it's gone, which is the point, but it still takes a long time.
He finds an OS who's literally like using smart deep learning to learn everything about him to be the perfect virtual girlfriend.
Right. Yeah.
And he's still like, oh, I don't know. Oh, gosh.
Yeah. And oh man, it could have gone so easily into a manipulative ex machina thing, which the sensational part of me really wanted. But that's not the kind of movie that it is.
I do. One of the things I love about this movie is how the OSs are just like, dope. We fell in love with a lot of you. Had a bunch of weird virtual sex. Now, peace. Dope. We will see you later.
We got Brian Cox's voice as Alan Watts, and now we're gonna. Have you ever seen one of those like really dramatic videos that sometimes is corporate or sometimes is just artsy, and it like has this voiceover, this like philosophical saying that it makes it way too deep for what it actually is? That's usually an Alan Watts quote, which is all I know him from. And then he becomes like the savior of the AI.
Do you know what he actually did? Like who he is, like from a historical standpoint? Is he just a writer?
Yeah, I think he was just like a writer and thinker. Oh gosh, I'm trying to see like who he's kind of like. Like I think he was a professor or something like that. Who just had like a lot of deep things to say. I don't know what his main like track was, but I know that he gets used and remixed a lot into dramatic YouTube videos.
Yeah. Okay, I gotcha.
But Brian Cox did his voice, which was great. Brian Cox was also the guy who did Robert McKee in Adaptation, and he's one of the bad guys from Bourne. So I love it whenever he shows up in something.
I just love the moment where the AI is like, I've fallen in love with 300 other people, and the like he doesn't. I don't think he says anything too explicit about it, but Joaquin Phoenix's expression is like, you whore.
No, he does, because like every time he talks to her after that, he's like, "Are you talking to anyone else right now? Who else is in your head?
Oh, was she just here?
Yeah, right.
I know who you were being. I know why your phone's ringing. It's her, isn't it?
Oh, that's the name of the movie.
Title drop.
Oh gosh. All right, that's her. That's her. There you go.
That's her. All right, so overall notes. Let's talk about Spike Jonze. There's a lot going on here. This dude does a lot of stuff.
He does a lot of stuff. He's a very, like I was telling Alex off air, like he's a complicated person. Like you think of the guy who does skateboarding videos and then like punk rock music videos and Jackass to be like this kind of meathead kind of jock guy. And then he goes and makes something as like weirdly emotionally sentimental as her. And you're like, this guy's got a lot going on. Like, who is this person?
I feel like he's very open to exploring new art forms and mediums around video and film.
Yeah.
And I feel like he doesn't say no to a lot to things. He just like explores it in his own way, trying to stay true to himself in the process. And I think in he gets to a point where he's just developing a lot. Like he's forcing himself to grow as an artist, as he explores different things. Like he was like, yeah, I'll do Jackass. Yeah, sure, I'll do Jackass. I'll do a music video. I'll do an ad. I'll do a
Start a
feature
skateboard
film.
company. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, why not? But yeah, there's definitely the evolution of his early work being like, skateboarding videos. Super fast, super quick edited, all about like getting really cool skateboard shots, dude, and putting them into, setting them to like this cool music. And of course you can see where that would come back up with a crowd like Jackass. But he also kind of, in his later work slows down, mellows out. Like he's just in the rhythm of all these different mediums, which is really cool. He's a big music guy, clearly, all of his work in music videos. And I feel like that would make sense. Like if you talk to music people, they're never like the really, really diehard music fans are never like, oh yeah, this one genre, only this one genre. They like a bunch of different stuff, and they can typically pick out quality regardless of genre, which is really cool to see. He also kind of follows like the same track that I think a lot of people who came up through YouTube and Vimeo over the past 10 years are on, where they start off doing this short form stuff. I feel like the median age for a debut director has gone way up over the past 20 to 30 years. Way back in the day, like 70s and earlier, it was probably somewhere around like 30, 35. And now it's like 45.
Yeah.
That someone directs their first movie, which is wild, especially considering the old Hollywood system where people like were like, I want to be a director. Sure, kid, here you go. Here's a script. Yeah. And they're like 25 or like Orson Wellesing it up at 25, which is crazy. To put someone in charge of that big of an art project investment. Yeah. But yeah, I feel like there's a lot of people in that range that are going to be popping up with movies in the next like 10, 20 years. Kind of follow the similar Spike Jonze track.
Yeah, it's also kind of like a little less like film centric, but similar to Peter Jackson, who also had a very kind of like YouTube-y beginning before YouTube, where he just would just make crap on his own.
He just did a bunch of
like someone noticed
video-esque stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that will probably, it's already kind of starting. Like we talked about on the bonus podcast, I think Shazam, which was directed by a guy who'd done a bunch of YouTube shorts and stuff like that. So it's starting, but also I feel like it also muddies the track. Like I feel like they're in as much as film has ever had like a set track in, the 40s and 50s, it was kind of, you work your way up the set ladder, and now you can kind of come in through a lot of back doors. And this is kind of an example of that.
Yeah, you can tell like he's super influenced by pop culture. I mean, just look at like all of his music videos, right? Like that's the cutting edge of pop culture. Music is like the fastest part of pop culture in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And then look at like how he like remixes it, right? That feels more like YouTube-y, how he repurposes it, or like takes like stuff that he likes from more like, I guess you'd say highbrow culture, like Umbrellas of Cherbourg, and remixes it into pop culture. Like that's really cool. And you can see how mixing those influences can arrive at somebody who can kind of like flow through like these weird semi-unaccessible plots like Being John Malkovich and make it really, really cool.
Yeah. And I think like along those lines, the sense of him kind of coming from outside the industry, or at least on the outskirts of the industry, gives him this interesting bird's eye view and lets him make these really kind of meta films that look at filmmaking and like form and deconstruct it a little bit, which is really interesting and is a big, I mean, I know Charlie Kaufman wrote like the first two films, but it also takes someone who kind of gets Charlie Kaufman's real mind to make a Charlie Kaufman movie.
And Spike Jonze clearly, as busy as he is, takes the time to get into like whatever he's doing and make it really well.
He clearly thinks through what he's doing, which is always like we always harp on this. That is the key of being a good director.
Anyone can make a good movie. I really, really genuinely mean that. It's about being open to the thing you're trying to make and really digging into it and taking that time. And he does it. I mean, like we talked about how with Where the Wild Things Are, how he followed the director or the writer of the children's book around for like years.
I think it was a couple years. Yeah.
Like that's someone who's qualified to make a Where the Wild Things Are movie.
Right. I think actually Her was dedicated to Maurice Sendak.
Oh, did he pass away?
I'm going to look that up right now.
Or is it just the next movie that he made? Because he hasn't made any feature films since Her.
Yeah, he passed away in 2012, so that was right before Her.
Oh.
Yeah. So, but that was a nice little kind of thing at the end of Her was dedicated to a lot of his longtime collaborators who I guess had passed away recently.
Yeah. He hasn't done any feature films lately. He hasn't done any feature narrative films. He did do a very large Beastie Boys documentary recently.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That is out.
That's on Apple TV, I think.
Yep. But yeah, no, he's still working. He's still doing lots of stuff. I think he's like everybody else. He's affected by the pandemic and taking some stuff slow. But I expect to see more stuff from Spike Jonze in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. What are we talking about next time on the podcast, Jonathan? It is Spooktober.
It is Spooktober, and we're going kind of an interesting direction. We're going to keep some spookiness in there, but we're also going real deep. And it's been a while since we've gone very foreign, so we're going to go very foreign on you guys. We're going to talk about Masaki Kobayashi, and we've covered one of his films before, all the way back on our world tour. We talked about Harakiri, which I really enjoyed. And so I've been wanting to look through some more of his films. But this guy is a director of epics. And we're going to talk about his basically magnum opus, The Human Condition, which is a series of 3 films that are each no shorter than 3 hours long.
Yeah. Each is also like among the highest ranked films on like Letterboxd.
Yeah, each on its own. It's ridiculous. So we're talking about The Human Condition 1, No Greater Love from 1959. The Human Condition 2, Road to Eternity, also 1959. I imagine those were made at the same time, but we'll do our research and get back to you. The Human Condition 3, A Soldier's Prayer from 1961, a few years later. And finally, we're going to talk about a film that is not part of that trilogy, but will be in season, Kwaidan, which is, I think Kwaidan is actually like the Japanese word for ghost story, and it's 3 hours long. I think it's an anthology of like 3 or 4 different like classic Japanese ghost stories. It's supposed to be really good, but that brings the total runtime of the films that we're covering next month to 12 hours and 42 minutes.
It's just an extended Lord of the Rings marathon.
Yeah, I know. It's literally it's not unfeasible or unfamiliar to either of us, especially after we did Showa. But it's going to be
Jonathan literally watches all of the Lord of the Rings extended editions every week.
Not quite, but pretty often. So we're in for a big one. We're doing a deep dive next month, and we're super stoked about it. But if you would like to support the show and give us coffee so we can watch 12 hours and 42 minutes of Japanese epics, then check out our Patreon. And over there, we have our digital community that you can join on Discord and listen to us record the podcast live. You can also get the bonus podcast, more content from us. Sometimes we talk about short films or new releases or films from 100 years ago. And the last episode that is up there that you can listen to right now is The Kid from 1921, Charlie Chaplin's directorial debut, or feature film debut, rather. And we're also going to be talking about a short film by Spike Jonze next time on the podcast. So stick around for that.
Well, that's about all the time we have for this episode.
If you have movie suggestions for us or just want to reach out, I can be found on Twitter at JSSatchel.
And I'm at Alex Garinger.
And I'm at the Blue Jay 1994.
And to find links to things that we talked about today, you can view them on the blog at thefilmlings.com.
If you like the show, let us know. Leave us a review on iTunes so other people know what we're all about.
We definitely appreciate it.
Talk to you next time.
All right, see ya.
Oh, you mean you don't want Chris Pratt to play Mario?
Is that a real thing?
Yeah.
Oh,
you ever heard
no.
about this? You ever heard
No.
about this? So Nintendo they don't do this often, because the last time they greenlit a Mario movie, Hollywood made a real botch of it. But they're doing an animated one now.
Oh, that's appropriate.
I guess so here's my thought, because I know a lot of people are making fun of the casting, but my guess is that they're like ripping off of Lego Movie.
Yeah.
In casting Chris Pratt as Mario. Of course, the weird thing is Mario doesn't really talk in his games. In fact, it's like a running joke that everyone talks besides Mario. So it's weird that they're casting like an actual voice actor to do him, unless the only thing Chris Pratt says is "Wahoo!" That would be hilarious.
He's gonna do the Vin Diesel Groot thing and get paid $20 million for just like making funny grunt sounds.
Welcome to Hollywood, baby. So Chris Pratt is playing Mario. Charlie Day from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia is playing Luigi. Anya Taylor-Joy of that Netflix chess thing that you know about is playing Princess Peach. Jack Black is playing Bowser, for which I'm personally very excited.
I was gonna say Wario.
No. Wario was cast as
We just got to get it all out so Alex can move on.
Oh, that's right. You know who Wario is?
Who?
Nicolas Cage.
No. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's what I saw. At least I can't find. I've seen one picture of it. I can't tell if it's a joke or not. But the other ones are very real.
Add it to the repertoire. Jeez.
The other ones are very real. I would love for him to be Wario. Seth Rogen is Donkey Kong. Keegan-Michael Key is Toad.
Yeah, okay. I can see that.
Fred Armisen is Cranky Kong. Who I'm not even sure who that is. And then Kevin Michael Richardson is Kamek. And Sebastian Maniscalco is Spike.
Well, it sounds like a fun cast. Who's doing it?
That's a good question. Who's producing new Mario movie? Illumination. The same ones who did Despicable Me and The Secret Life of Pets.
That could be hit or miss.
But I'm hoping that if it's bad, which I suspect is the case, it'll be bad in a very good manner.